Atlanta, Georgia. Marcus Reed had been driving powerful people for 7 years, but he had never once been invited upstairs. Until the night his boss asked him to meet her in room 2804. He told himself it was just work. He told himself it was a scheduling issue. He told himself he wasn't thinking about the way she looked at him lately. But across the city, a woman who loved him sat on the edge of her couch, staring at her phone, wondering why he hadn't answered her last 3 calls. By morning, 1 kiss would exist, 2 women would be crying, and only one of them knew exactly what she was doing. Before we unravel what really happened, I want to know something. What city are you watching from right now? Type it in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe, because the truth behind this one, it only gets darker from here.
Marcus Reed had one rule that kept his life clean. Stay in your lane, literally and figuratively. 7 years behind the wheel of other people's ambitions had taught him that the moment a driver starts wanting what his passengers have, he crashes. Not always in the car, sometimes just in himself. He had watched it happen to other men. He refused to let it happen to him. He was 32, built like someone who had always had to carry his own weight. He lived in a tidy 2-bedroom off Campbellton Road, sent money home to his mother on the 1st of every month, and kept his personal life so quiet that his closest friend Jerome once joked that Marcus didn't have a personal life. He had a schedule with good intentions. He had been driving Eleanor Whitmore for 11 months, private contract, premium pay. She was the CEO of a New York tech firm, temporarily in Atlanta while her company finalized a Southeast expansion deal worth north of $40 million. She was 34, white, blonde, and moved through the world like someone who had decided years ago that hesitation was for other people. She was not warm, but she was precise, and Marcus respected precision. She never asked him personal questions. She never made him feel like furniture either. Their arrangement worked because both of them understood what it was: professional, clean, transactional. He showed up, he drove, he kept his eyes on the road. What he hadn't admitted to himself, not yet, was that something had shifted in recent weeks. Eleanor had started watching him in the rearview mirror, not the way passengers watch drivers when they think they're invisible. This was different, deliberate, a half-second too long. The kind of attention that has already made a decision and is waiting to see if you've caught up. He noticed. He filed it somewhere in the back of his mind where he kept things he wasn't ready to deal with. That was his second mistake. His first was not realizing that Eleanor Whitmore never did anything without a reason, not even the watching. On the night everything unraveled, Marcus was sitting in the parking structure beneath the St. Regis Buckhead, engine off, waiting for a call to confirm pickup time. His phone buzzed at 9:47 p.m. Not a call, a text, 4 words from Eleanor's number. Come up, room 2804. He stared at it for 11 seconds. He counted later because it was the kind of moment a man counts when he is trying to understand how he got from there to where he ended up. He told himself it was work. He told himself she needed to brief him on tomorrow's schedule. He told himself the fact that his pulse had ticked up meant nothing at all. He took the elevator to the 28th floor. He did not call Amara first. He would regret that longer than anything else that happened that night. 3 months before that elevator ride, Amara Bennett had landed at Hartsfield-Jackson with 4 boxes, a carry-on, and a version of herself she was still figuring out how to wear. She was 29, black, beautiful in the way that made strangers underestimate how much she was watching them. She had grown up on the North Shore of Chicago in a house where wealth was as ambient as weather. You didn't notice it until you left, and suddenly the air was different everywhere else. Her father ran a private equity firm that managed 9 figures. Her mother sat on 3 charitable boards and hosted dinner parties where senators ate off imported china. She had never asked for any of it. That was the part people never understood. They assumed wealth made everything easier.
What it actually did was make everything uncertain. Every man who smiled at her, she eventually had to ask herself, is this me he sees, or is this my last name? And she asked that question enough times and gotten the wrong answer enough times that by 29, the asking had worn her down to something thin and guarded. The last one was named Daniel, investment banker, charming in a way that looked authentic until you saw the math behind it. 8 months in, she had found an email thread on his laptop. She hadn't been snooping, she'd been looking for a charger, and read in his own words a message to his business partner, calculating the probability that marrying her would solve their Series B funding gap. He had written, conservative estimate, 2 years, worth it. She made it to his bathroom before her legs gave. She was on the cold tile floor for 20 minutes. She left while he was in the shower and never answered his calls. That was February. By August, she was in Atlanta, telling no one her last name, renting an apartment under a lease she paid for with a separate account she had quietly set up in her own first name only. She took a job at a small digital magazine, junior editor. The pay was fine, not Bennett family fine, actual life fine. She bought second-hand furniture. She learned how to keep a fern alive. She introduced herself as just Amara, period. She met Marcus because her rideshare driver canceled twice on a Tuesday morning and she needed to catch a 6 a.m. flight. She booked a private car through the corporate app her magazine used. He pulled up in a black Mercedes. He got out without being asked and took her bag with a care that wasn't performance, just instinct. He didn't fill the silence with questions. He just drove. She tipped him $80 on a $40 fare. He looked at his phone, looked at her in the mirror, and said, "You didn't have to do that." 3 words that meant nothing and somehow meant everything. She thought about them for most of the flight. Not what he said, how he said it. Like the extra money made him slightly uncomfortable, like he would rather earn it. She booked him again the following week and the week after that. They talked more each time, easy, real talk, the kind that sneaks up on you because neither person is trying to impress the other. He told her he grew up in Southwest Atlanta and had put himself through logistics school. She told him she was from Chicago and had left something behind she wasn't ready to name. Neither pushed, neither performed. It was the most honest she had felt with anyone in years. By the 3rd week, she realized she was booking rides she didn't need just to have the conversation. She didn't tell him that, but she thought about whether she should. She didn't know yet that across the city, his boss was thinking about him in a way that had nothing to do with logistics. And she didn't know that his boss had been thinking about her much, much longer than that.
It started with money, because it almost always does. Eleanor called Marcus into her suite on a Wednesday evening in late October and slid a new contract across the glass coffee table without ceremony. The number on it was 40% higher than what he was currently making. He looked at it, looked at her, said nothing. "You've earned it," she said. She was standing at the floor-to-ceiling window with a glass of scotch, the Atlanta skyline lit up behind her like something staged. "Reliability is the rarest thing I pay for. You have it." He signed. He left the drink she'd poured him mostly untouched. He drove home thinking it was a straightforward professional decision, and feeling somewhere underneath that thought that he was simplifying something that wasn't simple. The evening meeting started after the raise. Nothing official. Eleanor would text after her day wrapped, "Can you come up? Need to go over the week." He went. That part was still clean. She was a CEO with a full calendar, and he was paid to be available. That was the job. But the meetings changed shape slowly, the way water changes a riverbank, so gradually you don't notice until the whole landscape is different. She stopped having paperwork in front of her. She asked questions that weren't about schedules. One night she asked him what his father was like. He told her his father had left when he was 9 and that he had made peace with it eventually, but that eventually had taken most of his 20s. She listened the way very few people listen, without preparing their next sentence. It unsettled him, because it was the kind of listening he associated with someone who actually cared.
He told himself she was lonely. Powerful people in unfamiliar cities often were. He told himself he was reading context into her attention because he was a man who hadn't been paid enough of it lately. He had explanations for everything. What he didn't have an explanation for was the Tuesday night she answered the door in a silk robe instead of the blazer she always wore during their meetings. She said she had just come from the bath. She didn't move out of the doorway immediately. She let him stand there, just for a breath. Then she smiled, the practiced, controlled smile, and stepped back to let him in. He sat on the far end of the couch. He kept the conversation on logistics. He left after 40 minutes and sat in his car for 10 minutes before starting the engine. He called Amara on the drive home. She answered, laughing about something that had happened at work, and the sound of her voice, easy, warm, completely without agenda, landed on him like a hand on his chest. He talked with her for an hour. He said nothing about Eleanor. He filed it under nothing happened, so nothing to say. He was not wrong, not yet, but he was at the age of something, and some part of him knew it, and he kept choosing not to name it. That choice was about to run out of road. The Four Seasons bookhead on a Friday night looks like money sounds, low and warm and sure of itself. Eleanor had booked a corner suite for what she told Marcus was a client dinner debrief. He drove her there at 8:30. She was in a cream blazer and didn't say much on the ride, which she had learned to read as her thinking hard about something. She asked him to come up, said she needed to walk through the presentation changes before Monday. He had a folder of notes in the car. That made it feel legitimate. He took the folder. He took the elevator. The suite was not set up for work. Dim lighting, wine open on the table, no laptop, no documents, no sign of the debrief she had described. The city was spread across the glass behind her like a backdrop someone had rented. She poured 2 glasses before he sat down. He set his folder on the table and did not open it. She talked about New York, about what it cost to run a company at her level, about the particular loneliness of being the most capable person in every room you walk into. It wasn't a performance. That was what made it dangerous. It was real. Somewhere underneath Eleanor Whitmore's architecture was a woman who was genuinely tired, and she was choosing to let him see that. He understood it was a choice. He understood it meant something. He kept his hands around the wine glass and said very little. She crossed the room and stood at the window. She said, "You're the only person in this city I don't have to manage." She turned and looked at him directly, the way she never did in the car. "Do you know how rare that is?" He stood up. He meant to say something that closed the room down. He had the words ready. She kissed him before he used them, and for 2 seconds, not long, but real, but his, he didn't stop it. Then he did. He stepped back. He said her name once, quietly, the way you say someone's name when you need the moment to stop moving. She looked at him with something he couldn't fully read, disappointment folded inside composure. He set the glass down. He picked up the folder he had never opened. He said, "I can't do this." He left. In the elevator going down, he stood perfectly still and felt the full weight of 2 seconds. Not 5, not 10, 2. But in 2 seconds, a man can lose his own respect, and Marcus Reed had nothing if he didn't have that. He drove home with the radio off and the windows down despite the October chill. He did not call Amara. He sat in his parking lot and stared at her name on his phone for a long time. Then he put the phone in his glove box and went inside. Across the city, Amara had called him 3 times. She was sitting on the edge of her couch when the last call went to voicemail. She set the phone down. She told herself he was probably working. She had no way of knowing what had just happened in a hotel room 20 minutes away. No way of knowing that a camera in the elevator lobby had captured everything. And the person who would weaponize that footage had been planning for this moment longer than either of them knew.
Amara saw it on a Saturday at 7:14 in the morning. She was in her kitchen, coffee still brewing, scrolling on her phone with the half attention of someone not fully awake. A message from an unknown number. No name, no text, just a clip. 23 seconds.
Hotel lobby, marble floors, the light the color of amber. Marcus in that black suit she knew, a woman in cream, close, too close, leaning in. The clip cut exactly before he stepped back. All that remained was the reach, the contact, a man letting something happen. She watched it 4 times. The 4th time, she was looking for something, a flinch, a lean away, any proof of the version she needed to believe. It wasn't there. Not in the edit, not in the 23 seconds they had given her. She put the phone face down on the counter. She stood at her kitchen window and watched the park below for a long time. A woman was walking a dog. A man was jogging with headphones in. The ordinary world was still going at its ordinary pace, and she was standing in her kitchen, feeling like the floor had swallowed 6 inches. She didn't call him. She sat with it for 3 hours, the particular cruelty of sitting with something you can't yet confront, because confronting it makes it real. By the time her phone rang at noon and his name appeared on the screen, she had already built and demolished 4 different versions of what she would say. She answered. He didn't lead with an excuse. He didn't say, "It's not what it looks like," which she would have hung up on, because that sentence has never once been true. He said, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to let me finish before you respond." She said nothing. He took that as permission. He told her everything, the raise, the evening meetings, the way they had shifted, the suite on Friday, the wine, her words at the window, the kiss, the 2 seconds, the moment he stepped back. He said, "I left. I want you to know I left, but I need to be honest that I didn't leave the instant I should have, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise." Silence. Then, "Who sent the clip?" "I don't know." "The clip is cut." "I know." Another silence, longer this time. He waited. She was processing not just what he had told her, but the fact that he had told her, that he had called her before she confronted him, before she gave him the chance to construct a lie. A guilty man prepares a story. Marcus had just handed her the unedited version before she even asked for it. "I need a few days," she said finally. "Okay," he said, "I'll be here." He resigned from Whitmore Strategic Partners on Monday morning. Email, 2 weeks' notice, professional, no explanation. Eleanor read it and did not respond, which told Marcus everything. A surprised person would have called. A person who had been waiting for the consequence only needed to file the receipt. He called Amara on Wednesday and asked if she would have dinner with him. Not to explain further, he had said everything there was to say, just to sit across from her and let her see his face and decide what it told her. She said yes. They sat in a restaurant in Inman Park for 2.5 hours. They talked slowly. They ordered dessert without planning to. When they left, she reached for his hand on the sidewalk and held it for half a block without saying anything. He understood what it meant. She was not forgiving the 2 seconds. She was choosing to stay anyway, because something real was worth more than something perfect. What neither of them talked about yet, what neither of them could fully see, was who had sent that clip, and why they had been watching closely enough to capture it, and what else they might already know. Eleanor went cold the week after Marcus resigned. Not obviously. Eleanor didn't do anything obviously. She went cold the way expensive machinery goes cold. No sparks, no noise, just a quiet, incremental shutdown that you only notice when something stops working. She canceled 3 professional engagements in Atlanta. She stopped attending the networking dinners where Amara's colleagues circulated. She pulled back from every space where their lives overlapped, and Amara, who didn't know the full geography of those overlaps yet, felt the change the way you feel a draft in a room without being able to find the open window. She had met Eleanor 2 months into her Atlanta life, introduced through a mutual contact at a tech media event. Eleanor had been polished and precise, remembered Amara's name the second time they crossed paths, and said all the right professional things in all the right professional tones. Amara had filed her as a useful connection and nothing more. But now, in the quiet aftermath of the video, small things started surfacing that didn't quite fit that story. Eleanor had been in Atlanta for the exact same month Amara arrived. That could be coincidence. The mutual contact who had introduced them, Amara remembered now, had mentioned Eleanor first, had said, "There's someone who would love to meet you." That contact, when Amara gently circled back to ask how they knew Eleanor, got vague in a way that vague people get when they don't realize they're being vague. None of it was solid. All of it felt like smoke. Then there was this. 2 days after Marcus resigned, Amara ran into a woman named Diane at a coffee shop on North Highland. Diane had worked at Whitmore Strategic Partners as a junior analyst the previous year. They had met at a panel event. Diane made small talk, then leaned in and said, almost too casually, "I heard your guy left the company. Smart move." That woman collects people like assets and disposes of them the same way. Amara asked what she meant. Diane got a look on her face like she had already said too much. She changed the subject. She left quickly. Amara sat alone with her coffee for a long time after that. Here is what Amara didn't know yet, what she was still only feeling around the edges of without being able to name it. Eleanor had not ended up in Atlanta by accident. The expansion deal was real, but the timeline had been accelerated. The firm's Atlanta office could have been handled remotely for the first 6 months. Eleanor chose to come in person. She chose the specific window. And she had been watching Amara's social media footprint, her professional moves, her location, not obsessively, not in any way that left obvious fingerprints, but consistently and with purpose. She had been doing it for 10 years. Amara didn't have that piece yet. She had the outline of a shape she couldn't see whole. What she had was instinct, and instinct was telling her that the woman behind the video and the woman who had introduced herself so smoothly at that tech event were connected to something that ran much deeper than a jealous boss and a 23-second clip. She started pulling threads. She was very good at it. Her father had taught her that you understand power by tracing it backwards. Find the decision and ask who benefited. She opened her laptop one night after Marcus fell asleep on her couch and began building a quiet, careful, methodical map. She did not tell him what she was doing, not yet. Some things need to be certain before they can be spoken.
It took Amara 3 weeks to find it. The fellowship roster from Boston University, 2016, Whitmore Ellis Grant in Applied Technology. 2 finalists, Amara Bennett, Eleanor Whitmore. Amara stared at that document on her screen for a long time without blinking. Then she traced backward through 11 years, and the things that had always felt like bad luck began rearranging themselves into something with a shape. The architect she had dated in 2021, who had cooled without explanation the week after a dinner party Eleanor had also attended. The editorial job she had lost in 2022 after an anonymous tip reached the hiring manager about her family's wealth, information Amara had never shared publicly, information that had required someone who knew her. Daniel, the investor who had done math on her like she was a spreadsheet, even him. Who had given Daniel her professional history? She booked a flight to New York. She didn't call ahead to warn Eleanor. She called the Whitmore Strategic Partners office, told the assistant she needed 20 minutes of Eleanor's time on a professional matter, and gave her real name, both names, first and last. The assistant came back inside 30 seconds. Eleanor would see her Thursday at noon. That confirmed it. A woman with a clean conscience would have said, "I'll have to check her calendar." Eleanor had said yes immediately because she had been waiting for this knock on the door for years, and she had a version of this meeting prepared. The conference room was glass and chrome, 20 floors above Midtown, rain streaming hard down the windows. Eleanor was already seated when Amara walked in. She was composed, she was always composed, but there was something underneath it, a tightness around her jaw, the composure of a woman who has rehearsed, not the composure of a woman who is relaxed. Amara sat down. She did not say hello. She opened her phone and placed the fellowship roster on the table between them, then the photo from the 2021 dinner party, both of them in the background, Eleanor speaking privately to the man Amara would stop hearing from 5 days later. Then the printout of the anonymous email that had sent the tip to the hiring manager in 2022. Then the 23-second clip. She said, "Tell me I'm wrong." Eleanor looked at the documents. She did not touch them. The silence ran for 10 full seconds, Amara counted. Then Eleanor exhaled through her nose and leaned back in her chair. Not defeated, not caught, something stranger than either of those things. Relieved, like a woman who had been holding something very heavy for a very long time and had just been told she could set it down. "You won the fellowship," Eleanor said. Her voice was steady and quiet. "You were better. I knew that then. I know it now. That part was always true." "Then why?" Amara said. "Because you made it look easy." Eleanor looked at her hands. "Everything I had to grind for, you walked into. The way people received you, the way rooms turned toward you. I watched you for 4 years at that school, and I could never find the thing you were doing wrong, the thing that was costing you something. You just existed, and good things came." She stopped. "I know how that sounds. It sounds like you spent 10 years punishing me for being alive." Eleanor didn't argue. There was nothing to argue with. She sat across the table from Amara and looked like someone seeing for the first time the full size of the thing they had done. Not because Amara was yelling, because Amara was calm, and calm is so much more devastating. "The video," Amara said, "you filmed it. I had access to the security feed through the hotel's corporate account. The company used the property regularly." A pause. "I edited it. I sent it. You tried to destroy something real because you couldn't build something real for yourself." She stood. She picked up every document on the table. She put them back in her bag. She looked at Amara one last time, not with hatred, not with contempt, with the specific clarity of a woman who has just diagnosed something and knows exactly what to do next. "We're done," Amara said. She left without waiting for a response. On the elevator down, she did not cry. She had expected to. Instead, she felt something she hadn't felt in years, like the floor was exactly where she had left it. She told Marcus everything when she landed. Not at the airport. She needed walls around her, needed to be in her own space. She texted him on the way home. "Can you come over? There's something I have to tell you. Both things." He was at her door in 40 minutes. He knew about Eleanor. She had called him from New York, shaking in an Uber, and told him the broad shape of it, the fellowship, the decade, the interference. He had been quiet on the phone in the way Marcus got quiet when he was holding something down with everything he had. He had said, "I'm so sorry. That should never have been put on you." She believed him completely, but there was still the other thing. She poured them both water. She sat across from him at her kitchen table, the same table with the second-hand chair she had bought when she moved here, when she was building a small, quiet life as a just Amara, and she told him about the Bennett family, all of it, her father's firm, her mother's Chicago world, the men who had reached for her last name while pretending to reach for her, Daniel and the email and the bathroom floor, why she had come to Atlanta as nobody, why she had never volunteered her last name, why she had paid for it everything herself and taken a job she was overqualified for and built a life that looked ordinary because ordinary was the only context in which she could trust what she was being given. She told him that he had passed a test she had never told him he was taking. The silence that followed was the longest of her life. Marcus looked at the table for a moment. Then he looked at her. His face was doing something complicated. She had learned his face well enough to read the weather in it, and what she saw was not anger, not hurt in the simple sense. It was something more specific, a man recalibrating, checking whether the ground beneath him was the ground he thought it was. "You asked me to be straight with you," he said. His voice was low. "About Eleanor, about every bit of it. I was, and you were sitting on this the whole time. I know. That's not the same kind of honest. No, it's not." He stood up and walked to the window. He put his hands in his pockets and stood there looking out at the park, and she watched his shoulders and waited. She had promised herself she would not beg, she would not explain herself into the ground or bury him under context until he forgave her out of exhaustion. Either what they had was strong enough to hold the truth, or it wasn't. She had to know which one. "The whole time I thought I was falling for someone who chose this life," he said, still at the window. "Small apartment, regular job, counting quarters for the fancy coffee." He turned. There was something raw in his face now. "That was real to you, or was that a role you were playing?" "Both," she said. "It was real because I needed it to be, and it was a test I couldn't tell you about because telling you would have made it pointless. I know that's not fair. I'm not asking you to think it's fair." She held his gaze. "I'm asking you to understand that you are the first man I have ever been with who made me feel like the money didn't matter. Not because you didn't know about it, because I watched you for months and I know who you are. You would have treated me exactly the same." He was quiet for a long time. "I know I would have," he said finally, and there was no pride in it, no self-congratulation, just a man stating a fact about himself. "That's not the part that hurts. The part that hurts is that you didn't know it yet. After everything we'd been through, you still weren't sure." She didn't have an answer for that, because he was right. He came back to the table. He sat down. He looked at her in the direct, unhurried way he had looked at her since the very first morning, the way that had made her book a ride she didn't need, and then another, and another. "I'm not walking away from you," he said, "but I need you to stop testing things that are already proven. We're past that." She nodded. She reached across the table. He took her hand. They stayed like that for a long time without talking, and it was the most honest they had ever been with each other, and it was enough. Amara made 2 calls the week she returned from New York. The first was to a journalist she trusted, a woman she had known from college who covered corporate misconduct for a national publication. She gave her the documents, all of them, the edited video, the source footage she had legally obtained from the hotel's records office with a formal written request, the email trail from the anonymous account, and the written account of 3 former Whitmore employees who had been waiting quietly for someone credible to come forward. She didn't ask for control of the story. She handed it to someone whose job was to tell it correctly and stepped back. The second call was to her father. That one was harder. She told him about the last year, the move, the life she had built, Marcus, what she was trying to find, and what it cost her, and what it gave her. Her father was quiet for a while. Then he said, "I always knew Chicago was too small for who you were becoming." That was as close as Richard Bennett got to "I'm proud of you," and she received it fully. The story ran on a Thursday, 2 weeks before Eleanor's January board meeting. It was thorough and documented, and named names without hedging. Professional misconduct, suppressed internal complaints from 2 junior employees, the
Use of personal access to security infrastructure to obtain and distribute manipulated footage. A decade-long interference in a private individual's personal and professional life. Eleanor did not comment. Her PR team issued a statement that nobody read past the first line. The board meeting happened anyway. It lasted 4 hours. Eleanor resigned before the end of the week. She went back to New York and, as far as Amara ever knew, stayed there. There was no dramatic final moment, no public confrontation, Just a woman who had spent 10 years trying to diminish someone else, quietly packing her things and disappearing from the frame. Amara heard about the resignation through the journalist. She read the 2-sentence notification and felt nothing dramatic, just the particular specific relief of something ending that should have ended long ago. Marcus launched Reed Private Transportation the following April. 3 vehicles, 4 corporate clients to start. A business plan he had been sketching in notebooks since his 2nd year behind the wheel, a dream he had never said out loud, because saying it out loud meant admitting you wanted something, and wanting something was a place where men like him had learned they could get hurt. Amara funded the seed round. She made him pitch her twice before she signed anything. She questioned every cost projection and made him defend his pricing model and asked what his contingency was if he lost his largest client in year 1. He answered every question correctly, not because she had coached him, but because he had been doing this math in his head for years, and he knew it cold. When she finally signed the paperwork, he looked at her across the desk and said, "You didn't have to make me work that hard for it." She said, "You would have resented it if I hadn't." He thought about it. He said, "Yeah, you're right." They moved in together in the fall. Not a big conversation, not a proposal, just a gradual migration of things. And then one morning, Marcus was making coffee in her kitchen, and she looked at the 2 mugs and the jacket on the hook by the door and thought, this is already what it is. They made it official quietly, between themselves, in the way of people who don't need an audience for the things that matter. Josephine arrived 3 years later, a Wednesday morning in October, loud and certain, and entirely herself from the first second. She had Marcus's stillness in the eyes and Amara's way of watching a room before she decided to trust it. They named her Josephine because it meant she will add. Amara had looked it up one night and told Marcus at 2 in the morning, and he had said, "That's it," without hesitation. Some nights, Amara stood at the window after Josephine was down and watched the Atlanta lights drift through the glass and let herself think about all of it. Eleanor, Daniel, the bathroom floor in Chicago, every version of herself that had to exist before this one. She did not feel sorry for Eleanor, but she did not carry hatred either, because hatred is heavy, and she had decided early that she would not spend her strength on carrying things that didn't love her back. What Eleanor had never understood was this: you cannot sabotage a woman who is still moving. Every interference had redirected Amara somewhere better. Every closed door had turned her down a hallway that ended here, in this apartment, with this man, with this child, in this city she had chosen with open eyes. Marcus built the company. It grew. Within 4 years, he had 18 vehicles and a corporate contract with a firm that moved 300 employees through Atlanta daily. He hired 6 drivers, all of them men he trusted. All of them paid what they were worth, because he had been underpaid for long enough to know exactly what that cost a man's dignity. He never forgot where he started. He never wanted to. The beginning was the proof that the rest of it was real. Amara stopped hiding her last name, not as a declaration, just quietly, naturally, the way you stop hiding something when you found a life that isn't threatened by the truth. She was Amara Bennett. She was Marcus Reed's partner. She was Josephine's mother. She was a woman who had left a city and a name and a version of herself behind, and had found, in the least likely place, the most honest thing she had ever been given. Peace, not the peace of things being easy, but the peace of things being true, settled into her bones. She held it carefully. She never put it down.